Okay, good afternoon once again. My name is Mike McLeod. I'm Director of Member and Business Development for the British Columbia Hotel Association. Once again, this is our February edition of our BCHA virtual event series. We have a very compelling array of sessions planned for the remainder of 2023, but today we are going to kick things off with how to welcome LGBT plus travelers with our guests, who I'll introduce in a moment, from Canada's Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. Before that, I'd like to just begin by acknowledging that I'm coming to you today from the BCHA head offices in downtown Vancouver, which is located on the unceded and ancestral territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, which has been stewarded by them since time immemorial. Before we introduce our guest, I do want to also acknowledge our sponsors. So Fortis BC has been our sponsor and is our sponsor for our entire series in 2023. Fortis BC is moving forward and making progress to meet BC's diverse energy needs. This includes increasing our investment in energy efficiency and expanding their supply of low carbon renewable natural gas. If you are a hotel operator or other tourism facility seeking an energy efficient solution and looking to reduce emissions, Fortis BC can help provide a holistic solution and support you through the entire process. Our contact is Vladimir Koska, who many of you might know, and he can be reached at vladimirkoska@fortisbc.com. I'll put that in the Q&A down below in a second. Speaking of the Q&A, if you have questions for our guest today, please use the Q&A function. We'll be monitoring that. One of our guests today will probably be answering in real time as well as the presentation goes on. So once again, just please use the Q&A for questions. We will have a dedicated question period at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Loren Christie. Loren is a hospitality and tourism expert. Loren's career has been focused in sales and marketing for hotels and destination marketing organizations for more than 20 years. After starting his own company in September of 2020, he spent 2 years as managing director at Loren Christie Solutions, where he worked as a project manager, consultant, and trainer for a number of clients, including Canada's LGBT plus Chamber of Commerce, the only Chamber of Commerce uniting and advocating for the over 100,000 LGBT plus owned and operated businesses in Canada. In September of 2022, he joined the Chamber on a full-time basis. Loren sits on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario. Loren, it's a pleasure to have you today. I'm just going to switch my screen here and allow you to take over.
Great. Thank you, Mike, very much. And hello, everybody. Bear with me for 2 seconds while I put on my screen. Always fun to do the switch over. I think everybody can see that, I hope. I'll take it as a yes. So welcome. What I wanted to talk to everybody a little bit about today was diversity and inclusion, and how to welcome to us LGBTQ plus travelers and employees, and sort of make the case for to us LGBTQ plus inclusion. So I will get started. So today we're going to look a little bit about what that market actually means, who's included in that market, how to market to that particular market, and some sort of inclusion considerations that you should take into consideration to make your place a little bit more inclusive. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our program, the Rainbow Registered Accreditation, at the end. And again, we'll have Q&A, as Mike mentioned, at the end. We'll save some time for sure to get to that. So just to jump right into it, who is this market? Well, this market, which is often referred to as the gay market, is actually a lot bigger than that. It includes a whole range of folks in our community: lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, two-spirit, queer. But it's also important to recognize that it's also other groups, like mainstream groups that you would get, such as families and couples and seniors and youth and outdoor enthusiasts and foodies. So it really doesn't matter what your hotel or what your destination or what attractions might be around your hotel that specialize in. Pretty much someone in this group is going to want to go to your destination. Who makes up this market? it's estimated that there's 30 million people that are in this community in North America. And I should preface all of this by saying is where am I getting these numbers, which is always a great question to get. We embarked on a fairly large survey, which ended in March of 2020. On travel habits of 2S LGBTQ plus folks. And so this is all taken, just finished up. Literally, we got the results back a week before COVID kind of came down on the world in a hard way. So all of this could be seen through a COVID lens, but the numbers are sort of pre-COVID. So take that into account as I share some of them. And I won't go into a lot of the detail, but just to know that it is a fairly large group of people living in North America. And it's a group of people that tend to are fairly well educated. 45% have a bachelor's degree or more. They have a fairly sizable household income, certainly one that makes up the ability to give them the ability to travel. Sorry, next one here. So just a few things again about this particular customer from our community. More likely to hold a passport. We have stats that show that. More likely, as I just referenced, to have a disposable income. And they're pretty resilient. You know, it was interesting. We have, again, stats post 9/11, post SARS about the resilience. And again, not included in this study because it was pre-COVID, but post-COVID, you know, our friends at the International Gay and Lesbian Travel Association have stats that show the same thing, is that folks in our community were one of the first to get back on the road and get back out there. But one thing that you should remember about our community for sure is that in order for them to want to engage and stay at your properties and stay in your hotels, it's really important that you earn their trust. And once you earn that trust, we are loyal and we will be champions for your business and want to stay in your accommodations again. In terms of money, again, mentioned about the disposable income. It was kind of interesting to me out of the survey that, you know, of LGBTQ plus travelers, we also spend a lot more on a trip. Like when we go on trips, we want to spend the money on trips. We enjoy travel. The money is going to be there. So, you know, $1,855 per trip compared to $265 for the general traveling public, which I thought was actually a fairly interesting number to learn. Some of these slides, again, the main takeaway, I won't go into all of these, but what I think is very interesting about some of the next couple slides I show, you know, these are tourism activities that members of our community are looking for when they're traveling. Number one, food and dining, all the way down outdoor activities, arts and culture. None of this probably seems surprising because it's probably the same as the mainstream traveler. But what's interesting is it's not until you get to number 9 that there's anything even remotely related to 2S LGBTQ on the list, which all that is to say is that we want to do what everybody else wants to do, and we want to stay, in theory, we'll stay where everybody else wants to stay. Except for then there's this slide. So this is talking about destination motivators in particular. And again, a lot of the things on here, certainly in the top 5, for example, climate, value for money, bucket list destination, are not unlike a mainstream traveler, except for the number 1, which is safety. And 89% of the travelers, this was their number 1 most important thing. So although we will go into any restaurant and dine, stay in any hotel, all of those things are fine as long as we feel safe, welcomed, included, and free to be our authentic selves. It's the number 1 motivator at any destination, and therefore filters down into the hotel world as well. That when we're looking at a place to stay, if we feel like we can be ourselves there and feel safe, whether it's from physical abuse or verbal abuse or whatever the case may be, small, minor, whatever, safety is number 1. And I'm emphasizing that a lot because it's going to come up as we go through the rest of this presentation. So a huge takeaway from that survey for us. Not surprisingly, I'm sure to you, you know, we are well positioned in Canada, and BC included, of course, to do well with this market. You know, Canada ranks consistently as having one of the best qualities of life, one of the best places to visit. In terms of LGBTQ plus visitors, we do have a fairly good reputation as being one of those safe destinations. We're not perfect, but it's pretty good. So there's a lot of reasons, and you can see the other ones here, a lot of reasons why we have a chance to really showcase the world and our offerings to this community and increase travel and tourism with this community into Canada. There are, again, this particular slide, I will say I'm going to spend a little bit of time on it. It is part of a presentation that normally I would sometimes do in 2 hours. This is just a very high level thing, but essentially when we talk about, marketing to this community, what are some of the things that you need to do to successfully market to the LGBT plus community? Again, high level. One, have an engaged and visible local community. Super important that if you are based in whatever community you're based, and if you want to sort of stand out as a destination and accommodation for the LGBT plus Q travelers, you need to engage with the local community. There has to be a reputation, or they have to be included in some of the things you're doing, because if you do it solo and on your own, it won't feel as authentic and genuine as wanting to mix in with the community. And it's not included here, but one thing I always do think that's really important too is to have a local champion. So in your hotel or whatever the accommodation provider you are, they're almost always, to be successful, you need someone who's going to really say, this is a market that we want to attract. This is a market I believe in. A champion is always invaluable, and they don't have to be a member of the community, but they certainly have to be an ally. And I can, every successful business I've seen to attract this market has done so because they are engaged and have a champion. Number 2, establish a clear values, vision, and plan. That's not like any other strategy you have. So it's very, very same. Just make sure that you're very clear on what you want to do with this market. And I think one of the things I'll just mention there, I had referenced in a few slides ago about this market is a wide range of people. So don't just say, I want to go after the gay market. Look at a specific, maybe it's families, maybe it's LGBTQ plus families, maybe it's outdoor enthusiasts, depending on where you're going. You can be targeted. So be very clear with your vision and plan about which section of this community you want to go after. Build collaborative, local, regional, and broader partnerships. Again, I could go into this for a long time, but just to say that it really helps when you work together. And, looking in your province, you look at hotels that work well together, work with the different communities. Some may be more advanced in Vancouver, for example, about what they're doing with the LGBT plus community versus others. I look at Whistler. That's a great example of a destination that has done an amazing things with the LGBT plus community, certainly around Whistler Winter Pride. So building those partnerships with some fellow attractions or accommodations in those destinations and working together will help. Provide dedicated investment and support. This is really important. Again, it has to be continuous. I mentioned in an earlier slide that we show loyalty to those who put continued loyalty and trust in us. There is a reciprocal thing that builds there. And that's why it's really important to have the dedicated investment support. It's not just a one-off. And I also say, it doesn't have to be a lot of resource, and it certainly doesn't have to be a lot of money. Some people see that and they worry that, we have to invest so much money. It's not the case. And I'll give you an actual example. When Mike introduced me, he said I started out in the hotel world, which I did for many, many years. I used to work at the Sheraton Centre in Toronto years ago. And there was a few of us that were part of the community on the staff, and we went to our general manager and said, we want to get involved. What can we do? Pride Toronto is coming up. Is there something we could do? Anyway, we landed on that we would all do the Pride and Remembrance Run, which happened on the Pride weekend here in Toronto. And the general manager said, I will spring for some t-shirts for you, and you can have brunch at the hotel after. So it started off in the first year as sort of just 10 of us, breakfast and t-shirts. After 5 or 6 years of doing it, we had turned it into a client event. We brought clients that were part of the community, and it was a very low investment on the hotel's part, the brunch and some t-shirts, but it really became a thing amongst the employees and then our clients that we really looked forward to it. And we raised money for the local 519 community center. So again, it was dedicated investment support, not a lot of money, but it was there. And I do remember that GM for that to this day, because here I am talking about it. Offer unique products and experiences. I put a little caveat to this. This is if you can. If you can offer something unique, that's great. But again, the LGBT plus traveler is interested in many of the same things as the mainstream traveler is. So it's not 100% necessary. And I caution that if you do, make sure, again, it's genuine and authentic. When I started with the chamber last year, I went through and I looked at a lot of different websites for different hotels, and a lot of them had a pride flag on there and a pride package, but there was nothing to it. There was nothing other than just to say, here's a little rainbow flag. Sometimes the price was even more expensive, and I couldn't figure out why. I only saw that a couple times, but still. So if you're going to do something unique, make sure it's authentic and make sure it counts. Again, going back to my time at Sheraton, one of the things we offered is we did offer a Pride breakfast package, an overnight and breakfast, and the price was a little higher. But what we did is we included a $20 donation to the 519 Center. So there was something actually genuinely of good value there, and it would appeal to our community to do that because we knew that it was going to a good cause and helping charity in our community. And then last but not least, and this is super, super important, is implement inclusive marketing strategies and promotional activities. More so than the unique products, is to make sure that you are showing LGBTQ plus folks in your mainstream marketing. So your online digital, on your website, in your photos, examples from guests, blogs from guests, or comments from guests. Make sure that anything you do incorporates an LGBT plus individual in what they're in with the mainstream traveler, because we just want to see ourselves and what other people are doing. And it is the number one go-to for sure. You know, a bad example of that I've seen, again, just to use hotel examples, I remember lots of hotels that said that they were LGBT plus friendly and they had wedding packages. And looking at all of the pictures of brides and grooms, there was not one same-sex couple on their wedding pages. And when you think about it, same-sex marriage was legalized here in Canada in 2005. That's 18 years ago. I think that's enough time to add some pictures of some same-sex couples getting married. So just think about doing that. On the flip side, on a positive one, and this is the last one I'll mention here, which I always love, Air Canada, prior to their current in-house safety videos, which are kind of cool. If you've been on them, you see they show the different provinces and whatnot. But prior to that, they actually, it was a sort of a standard safety video, but they had a same-sex couple carrying lobster on the plane and trying to put their lobster in over the overhead bin, and then they got into their seats together. And as a gay Nova Scotian, it really spoke to me. And again, I remembered it because I see myself. I was that guy coming home with that lobster box with my husband many summers in a row. So it really does make a difference when you include marketing imagery of people. They see themselves in your product. This is maybe a little bit more for destination, so I won't go into this too much, but this again is just make sure to inform your strategy responsibly. If you are going to go after the market, don't just do it without involving some of the local community, residents, people who can actually inform what the LGBTQ plus experience is like in the destination. Just a couple of key considerations again, if you want to go after this market. Number one, do your research into the different segments like I've talked about. Consider pricing and product distribution channels. Again, this is part of a longer presentation, but what I will tell you on this one was fascinating is I believe it was around 77 or 78% of LGBTQ plus consumers went to straight direct website. So they checked right online at the attractions, products, hotels website directly and booked there versus going through third party. Again, so that just shows why it would be really important to have marketing imagery that spoke to that community. Identify your destination tourism product strengths. Again, all of those things that mainstream travelers like, so do we. So you don't need to create some sort of pride event or pride offering or drag this or that at your hotel in order to entice our community. Just identify the strengths and products that you have, and make sure that we feel safe and authentic when we're there doing it. Inclusive marketing, as I've talked about, engage the leaders, as I talked about it. And of course, most important of anything is if you're going to do it, be authentic when you do it and go for it from that. I'm going to take a quick little breath and give you a little foreshadowing of one of our programs, which I'm going to come back and talk about. But why I'm going to talk about it here is we have what's called the Rainbow Registered Accreditation. And all of the stats that I just shared with you, as I said, came from March of 2020. And during COVID, we got a grant from the federal government. We looked at the survey, and again, that safety was the number one thing. How do we know that we feel safe and included? So we got a grant from the federal government and created the Rainbow Registered Accreditation. And what it is it's Canada's first national standard for safety, safe and inclusive spaces. So it's for any business of any size, of any market, doesn't matter if it's travel and tourism, although the implications are obvious for it, to show to people that it's more than just that rainbow sticker on the website or more than just a flag, that there's actually some meat behind what they're saying and that they're saying that they're a safe space. So again, just to give you a little sneak peek at it before the end of the presentation, The Rainbow Registered Accreditation process goes through policies and practices, goes through the trainings that you might undertake, the commitment to inclusive leadership, and a culture of inclusivity. And we have assessors work with businesses to look at where they're going, give them a report so that they can use that report to build their strategy and hopefully become part of the Rainbow Registered family and become accredited, and showcase, therefore, to people, LGBTQ plus travelers who are looking around as a place to stay where they can feel safe, which is their number one concern. And this is the way of doing that. So I want to flip the switch a little bit. We had talked about when we first started the program in June of 2021, LGBTQ plus consumers and travelers, and I've just given you all the stats, and that's how the program was sort of born. But we recognized at the time that, of course, it was going to be important to potential employees and in current employees for places of business as well. What we didn't realize is just how important that was going to become. As we all know, there is a labor shortage, particularly in the tourism, travel, hospitality industry, and more so in hotels. And so when you look at where all the workers have gone and how do we address the labor shortage, it became clear that inclusivity is one of the ways to do that. Tourism HR Canada, the University of Guelph came out with a report a couple of months ago, is that immigration and coming up with an immigration strategy is probably the number one factor in that. But having an inclusivity strategy is also going to be important in attracting folks to your labor force. So since this is a talk about LGBTQ plus folks, I'm going to just give you a few stats on that. So in the last census, it was estimated that there are about 1 million Canadians that identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual, and almost a third of them are between 15 and 24, a third. It was also that 100,000 Canadians identify as trans or non-binary, and almost 60% of them were in that age category of trans or non-binary. Do I believe that people are becoming more gay as they get younger? Absolutely not. But what I believe is that younger generations of people are feeling more empowered and feeling more empowered to be their true authentic selves, which is wonderful. So when you see that rising group and that rising number of people self-identifying, it really shows that these are people that they're out, they're loud, they're proud, and they're here to stay. And if you're looking at trying to, increase your labor force, I think it's worth looking at this group of people who are really anxious to work in places that they want to be their authentic selves. Let me give you a couple of stats here. This is a very busy slide, I recognize that, but let me just give you a couple of things about workplace experiences for this group of people. Almost half of lesbian, gay, or bisexual women and over a third of gay or bi men reported that they felt inappropriate behavior in the workplace, more than double of their straight counterparts. When you look at gender diverse folks in the trans community, you're talking about 1 in 3 feeling precarious in their employment position. You're looking at a large, almost 50% feel they were fired, dismissed, or turned down for a job because of who they were. And you're looking at a high number of unemployed people because of all that, and that feeling that lack of safety and security in their workplace. So again, this seems to me that there's a connection being drawn here. If you're thinking about, shortages in your labor force, you've got a large number of people that are feeling that they aren't treated well in their workplaces. You've got a large number of people in a certain age category coming into the workforce, feeling like they're the ones that want to be empowered and feel like they can be their authentic selves. So I just want to take a minute to step back and just do a quick little preview, or not a preview, but a little look at a little more depth about one particular group. And those are the folks that are into gender diversity, because I think there's a lot of unknowns about this particular group. And it may give you a sense of why it's important to give them a workplace where they feel safe. So gender diverse folks, sex is your designation at birth. That's informed by your genital configuration. So whether someone is assigned male or female, that's their sex. Their gender identity is how they feel inside, their personal understanding and experience of gender. And it doesn't always match their sex. Their gender expression is the manners, behavior, and style and body decoration, how they display themselves outwardly to the world. And again, just to make things a little more confusing for you, it doesn't necessarily mean that their gender expression matches their sex or their gender identity. Someone can feel some way inside, but express themselves differently. They can certainly be assigned a certain sex and express themselves differently through their gender identity. So these are folks that are trying to make themselves through the world and figure out where they fall. On the bottom there, you'll see trans feminine, trans masculine. These refers to people who are going through a transition. So if you are a trans masculine, you may have been assigned sex female at birth, but you are transitioning into male. If you are non-binary, you do not identify with either gender. You are on the non-binary scale. And if you're cisgender, you identify with the sex that you were assigned at birth. So transitioning, if you are trans male or trans female and have made the decision to go through a transition, this is a super personal, subjective process. Some folks seek out partial transition, full transition for a variety of reasons, many of which could be financially driven, psychologically driven. There's a lot you have to do. You know, from a social perspective, you're looking at names and pronouns change and presentation and expression. The medical, depending on how far down the road an individual wants to go, can be extremely invasive. There's surgeries, procedures, hormone replacement therapies, and then the legal ramifications it's a nightmare. You know, I'm sure people on this call have all gone through the process, unfortunately, of grieving a loved one and getting a death certificate, and the amount of time it takes in even that instance to change details is aggravating, to say the least. And when you're someone that's trying to change your gender marker, from the few friends that I've had that have gone through this process, it is truly a horror show. So on top of all of that, they get invasive questions. They can face harassment, assault, and violence. They can have mental health issues if they don't have support groups around them. They're dealing with social expectations and perceptions of gender norms and roles and stereotypes that, you know, because people don't see the gender expression or gender identity that they feel. And all of this stuff makes life hard for a transitioning person. It's a tough go. And, you know, the key takeaway is that at the end of the day, all they're really asking is that we respect their identity, the identity that they match, that we respect that. So again, I wanted to just show that a little bit to say, imagine then if you're that group of people in particular who have not had a good go, who have had trouble getting work, and then all of a sudden you find a place where you're included and welcomed into a workspace where you can be your authentic self. So considering, you know, all of these efforts, the actions and efforts, if you do something that's meaningful, it can make a huge difference. So again, a couple of things that you can do to work with your current coworkers, potential new coworkers or customers to see where they're coming from. Just understand the historical context. You know, there's some pretty crazy numbers out there. If you look at the years, it wasn't until 2017 that the Canadian Human Rights Act recognized trans folks as actually legitimately human, which is pretty crazy that they were recognized in that. So that's only 6 years ago. So historical context is important. They've had a tough go. It's been a tough ride. For sure. And it wasn't until the late 90s that lesbian and gay men were included in that as well. Trusted sources of information, just make sure that you're keeping up onto sort of, you know, what's going on culturally with the LGBTQ plus community. Be cognizant of the language used, and I'll talk a little bit about that. The sense of belonging that folks can get from a place if you include them. And then the physical and psychological safety, again, get that safety is that number one component in making people feel like where they want to belong. I'm going to talk just quickly about the pronouns because it seems to be something that people are interested in if they're not as clear on it. The pronouns are used in places names when people are speaking about them, and it's really important for someone who is transitioning or non-binary to have their gender identity respected. And it doesn't matter if they're not around. It's a sign of respect, and it's really not that hard to do. So, the pronouns we're used to, she, her, hers, pretty self-explanatory, he, him, his, they, them, theirs. The bottom one, Z, zir here, that one is used more in New Zealand and Australia. You may find it. But the bottom line is, if someone gives you those pronouns as their pronouns, it's important to respect them. And one of the things I always hear, of course, is, it's not grammatically correct and, all that good stuff. But, the Webster's Dictionary in this last year had a couple of words, has many words come out, and some of them, they just make me shake my head. That what is it called? A paternity leave is now a thing. That's when you take time off to spend time with your pet. That's an official word now. So is adorkable, which I would never have used that as a proper grammar word before, but now the dictionary says it is. So my response to people who say that is, grammar and language and vocabulary is constantly changing. And so I don't put a lot of water in that. And if it's hard for you to think in terms of people using these on a regular basis, I like to use the example of, I'm going to go check out, I have a new dentist tomorrow that I've never met. I'm going to be interested to see what they say about my teeth. Or, hey, somebody left their wallet here. I wonder who, if it belongs, which, where they left it or why they left it here. When you're not sure of the sex of the person or the gender identity of the person, you tend to default to they anyway. So I challenge people who have troubles with it to try and use it, because it's one of the few ways you can really make a difference. And we've done a lot of training over the course of the last year and a half. We did some for the visitor centers out in BC, as well as in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and Ontario. And some of the folks that work at these visitor centers are so used to saying, hi, sir, hi, madam, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, whatever that may be. I said, it's such a simple thing to just say hi, folks, or hi, peeps, and then say, my name is Loren, my pronouns are he, him. And, it seemed to take a lot of the visitor centers aback a little bit, but I said, do it 5 times and you'll be used to it. And, it may not be that every person that walks in cares that you're using the pronouns, but wow, is it going to make a difference for the person that does care about the pronouns, wants their pronouns accepted? Because basically what it's doing with your language is, I talked about that importance of that diverse marketing imagery. And what you're doing is you're actually creating a welcome and open space with your language, just like you are there. By saying your pronouns, you're welcoming those people to say their pronouns if they want to, and showing them that it's a safe space in which they can do it. Again, that safe space is so key. And the last thing on that, I'll just say, one of our facilitators at the Chamber, TJ, is a trans male from Newfoundland. He's wonderful. He's the one that does a lot of these trainings in much larger pieces. And what he always says, the mistakes, don't worry about it. The biggest thing you can do if you make a mistake is just go, sorry, move on, and keep going. Don't fumble over yourself to make a huge, big production of it, because then all of a sudden you're putting the emotional baggage on that person to make you feel better when it's you that just misgendered them. But I do think there is a case to be made that sometimes people out there are so nervous about saying the wrong thing that they don't try and say the right thing. So I encourage everyone to try and do that. So all of that to say, if you are looking at your workplace, your hotel, your accommodation, whatever the case may be, and you're trying to encourage staff or encourage visitors that are coming in to see that you are indeed a welcoming and safe place, there's a few things you can do to show signs of that. Diverse staff and leadership, hire. We've all heard that before. Gender neutral washrooms or change rooms is a great way of offering that. Displayed signage. A sign that just simply says, we are welcoming to all sexualities, all genders, no discrimination. Just having that up there as a statement. Sharing the names and pronouns, like I just said, that the visitor center did. Gender neutral, respectful, and disclosed language is used. So again, perhaps use folks and people versus ladies and gentlemen. Participation in 2S LGBTQ+ events and acknowledgements of days of significance. This is a really interesting one. You can celebrate Pride and all that, but I love an example that I got from the folks at Explore Edmonton, the DMO there. They have personal days, like many organizations do, that people can use. We all know them. You take a day off to do this or that. but they renamed their personal days to ED&I days. And it cost them nothing to do it. But what it did is it opened up the conversation so that if someone was a member of the 2S LGBTQ plus community, they could say, I'm taking pride off to celebrate. That's my personal, that's my ED&I day. And it also opens it up to any any other cultures or religious holidays. And it was a way of reframing the personal days to say, we recognize that there are days that are important to you, whether it's a cultural day, religious day, whatever the day may be, a day of significance. So go out and take it. And if you want to talk about it because it's now become part of your ED&I day. So I thought that was a really great best practice that literally costs no money. And it was just a language change. And then, of course, regular organizational training at all levels. I can't emphasize this enough. It's not enough, I do not believe, to just do a one and done training. And it's also not enough, and I've seen them before because I've been through many of them, just to go through and do the little click through on your computer for 5 minutes to say that you did the training once a year that you need to do. I also don't think you need to be in training every month, but you should commit as an organization to once or twice a year going through legitimate training, particularly when you have high staff turnover. A couple of other things. If you have identified workers that are part of the 2S LGBT community, have mentorship opportunities with them for peers in the same community. Have benefit packages that recognize their identities and specific needs. And I always love giving the example out on Vancouver Island. There's a distillery called the Wayward Distillery. Some of you may know about it. They are one of our Rainbow registered family members. And I may get the numbers a little bit wrong, but roughly the story is that the distillery was started by spouses of 2 military members. And so they had been friends and they had spent a lot of their working career traveling around and kind of not feeling included in the communities they were at because they were always on the move. And when they moved back to Vancouver Island, the 2 spouses decided to start up this gin distillery and made a point of hiring people that were marginalized. And so one of the people that they hired to start with was someone in the trans community who was going through a transition. And they wrote policies, practices, and benefits with that person in mind to help them go through their transition as a way of reaching out and making them feel included. And it was so well done that person told a friend who told a friend, and now of their team of 16 or 17 or 18 people, however many it is, they have 3 employees who identify as part of the trans community, which I just think is so amazing when you talk about attracting employees to a place where they feel safe and included. You're seeing the theme as it comes through here now. A couple of other things, just assumptions about gender orientation and family relationship dynamics, and the family plans that's there next. It's really important. Like if you're going to ask someone how their wife or partner is doing, like do it for everybody. If you're throwing someone a shower because they got engaged, make sure you're doing it for the same sex couple as well. And make sure that 2S LGBTQ plus workers feel able to contribute by sharing their perspectives. Anyone who's outside of the dominant culture, it can be intimidating for them. So again, I won't go into that too much. Sorry, I'm going to go backwards here. The benefits. I think that there's a lot of benefits. It encourages groupthink, loyalty, and pride. But at the end of the day, what I'm talking about here, and my point here is by doing all these things, I really think it reduces turnover and heightens your appeal as a new employer. So in a case of a labor challenge market, it's a great opportunity to reach out into that market. Some of the challenges with this, of course, all those outdated policies, and we all know they're there, insufficient training, which I mentioned, biases and resistance to change, lack of commitment from leadership. Again, you need a champion. If they're not there, it's really hard. And again, surface efforts. It's really, it can be difficult if you're doing it in your hotel, but the people that you work with outside of the hotel and your other partners aren't doing it. You may be trying to create an inclusive environment for people, but it's not going to work so well for others. And I'll give a little shout out to, there's another hotel on Vancouver Island. I believe it's called the Kingfisher Inn. I hope I'm getting that right. And they do a lot around inclusivity. And when they do their training, they invite some of the businesses in their local area to come in and take that training along with the hotel staff, because they know when you're talking about customers coming in, it's great that they have a wonderful experience at the hotel, but what happens when they walk out the door to go to a restaurant next door or whatnot? And so I thought that was a really cool best practice of that hotel. So if you're not in charge, you can still help. If you're not the one making the decisions and one of the leaders is not helping, just make sure that you challenge bullying and harassment when you see it. Support all sorts of initiatives if you see them in or outside your workplace. Be an ally. Use that language even if it's not mandated. Change your signature even if it's not mandated. Respect the names and pronouns change. And just be mindful. One other thing I always say about this is, sometimes I go and we talk to workshops and people, and it's incredible to me how many people will sort of say, well, you know what? I only work with 10 or 15 people, and I can tell you none of them are part of the community. So how important is it? Well, first of all, I don't think you can actually tell that. I don't think you actually really know what's going on with someone personally, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Even more than that, I can almost guarantee you that any room that you're in, someone in that room will have a loved one that is part of the LGBTQ+ community without fail. And every single time I've gotten up and said that in a room full of people, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people stand up and said, you're right, my son, my daughter, my brother, my whatever that looks like, is part of this community and is going through that. And so if you don't take the time to make your place inclusive, you may be offending and turning off people that aren't necessarily part of the community, but are loved ones and allies of people in that community. And as the need for becoming your authentic self grows ever more, that is something that we'll recognize. So again, whether it's a guest you have or an employee that you have, they will tell the people in their lives that are part of that community if there's a reason to visit and stay at your accommodation. So that's the other reason why we created the Rainbow Registered Accreditation. Again, was, it wasn't the initial one-off thought, but the number of businesses that we have registering now that aren't actually consumer facing, because they want to work with their employees and their potential employees for doing it, is incredible. And so again, the Rainbow Registered Accreditation, it's a pretty simple process. You go online, you can, on our website at CGLCC.ca, you register, an assessor will contact you, and then an assessor will walk through these 4 pillars with you and look at all of the different things that you do in regards to these 4 pillars in order to satisfy the requirements to call you Rainbow Registered, and that you be able to say that you are a place that is safe and inclusive. A couple of other things about the program, which I think are great. Starting just past June, we launched the rainbowregister.ca website, which is a consumer-facing directory of all the businesses that are accredited across the country. Our next big thing, which we're in the middle of it right now, actually, we spent the first year getting businesses signed up, getting the word out about that, and we're on a good track. We currently have 167 businesses signed up across the country, with another 50 sitting with assessors right now. So we feel by the end of March, we're hopefully going to be around 250, 260, which is a great trajectory. It was a slow burn to start, but as the word gets out, we're getting more and more applicants every day, which is really great. But we're also right now focusing on the consumer message. So we're very keenly aware of that. It's a great thing to do, but you also want to see the ROI and make sure that people are aware that you're doing this. So we have been doing a lot of work in terms of consumer. We just attended the Travel and Adventure Show in New York, attended it to talk to American travelers, which are now looking north to Canada. And that was an amazing success. I think we had 4,000 people or so go by the booth. We are engaging we're engaging with Tartan Bond, which many of you may know is one of the larger PR travel and tourism firms in the country, on a campaign which is going to start imminently, which is going to be digital and marketing, and it's going to carry us for the next 2.5 months, which is going to be all targeted to getting consumers aware of Rainbow Registered and going to the website to plan their trips across the country at places where they can feel safe and included. So that was a lot of information to throw at people. I am well aware of that, but I know that we didn't have a ton of time, and I wanted to save some time for questions at the end. So forgive me for going quite so fast, but I'm actually going to stop sharing and see if anybody has any questions. And take a little breath and a little glass of water.
While you're doing that, Loren, please use the Q&A function near the bottom of the screen there if you have some questions. Loren, great presentation. Thank you very much. Great information, very useful for all of our members. We have a question from Christian Miller. Hi, Loren, always a pleasure. Do you have a recommendation or a list of successful training platforms, courses, etc.?
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's the Christian that I used to work with many years ago at the Sheraton. I got that right, Christian Miller, but nice to have the question. Yeah, we have trainings that we offer. We offer about 5 different trainings, one specifically for the travel and tourism industry, which gives sort of it goes over a lot of what I did in way more in depth, but then it uses a workshop to do workshop examples of scenarios. You know, someone comes up to your front desk, someone comes into your restaurant, whatever that looks like. So we have a couple of those, but not a lot. We're a chamber of commerce. We're not in the business of doing a lot of training. So we have 4 or 5. But what we also do have is a number of certified trainers who are who are our members, who are in the business of ED&I training, and certainly you can get a list of those from me. I'm happy to share those myself or Connor, including TJ, the person that I referenced that's based out of Newfoundland, who does an amazing job at training as a full-time facilitator. So happy to share that. I should maybe, Connor, if you can throw up in the Q&A or the chatter where so everyone can see it, our email addresses, if people want to get that directly from us, they can do that. Any other questions?
Yeah, we have another one here, Loren, from Sandra Stewart. What do you recommend for creating a gender neutral washroom when you only have a men's and women's available and can't add a washroom easily?
Yeah, this is one of the tough ones, and this is one of the ones that comes up a lot. So clearly, in an ideal world, you have that one door, one that you can make. If you don't, I will challenge you with this: just make them gender neutral. I know it feels, maybe it's a little affronting to some people, but at some point you might have to make that choice, and it's a choice you make, and you may decide not to do it. But if you don't have the money or the infrastructure right now to actually add a washroom or easily make one gender neutral, I challenge people to just make those washrooms gender neutral. I've been at many conferences at many hotels where there are gender neutral washrooms, and I've heard people say to me, I feel uncomfortable walking in when I see a urinal. That may be the case, but it's amazing how quickly you get used to it. And my main example I give for that is in 1992, I went to university at McGill in residence, and the residence washroom was gender neutral, male and female, not just toilets, showers, everything. You had to knock on the shower door and go through. And that first week, all of us were like, this is crazy. By the second week and for the rest of the year, it's amazing what you get used to very quickly, and the respect that people have. People are pretty respectful when they're in washrooms. That's not a place where bad things happen. So I would challenge you to go for it anyway. I've had this conversation with many people, and I totally respect that might be too hard on some people's heads to go forward. So make a plan to put in a gender neutral washroom, to convert something when you can if you have the money. But if you really want to be a trailblazer and forge ahead, just do it. People will get used to it. It's not that hard.
Awesome. Lots of good questions here. So Loren, I hope you're okay for a couple more minutes here.
Yeah.
Amy Nunn asks, do you have any suggestions for ways that our front desk and hotel teams can properly welcome LGBT guests? For example, don't assume that when 2 same-sex people are checking in that they want 2 beds. Ask them would they prefer queens or kings, etc. Any other suggestions like that?
Yeah, just make no assumptions. I gave the example of the visitors center, so just things like it's incredible when people go up and hi, ladies and gentlemen, or don't use honorifics, no Mr. or Mrs. Use generic words like people or folks when you're welcoming. Use your pronouns, so make it standard at the front desk. Hi, my name is Loren Christie. My pronouns are he, him. How can I help you? It opens up that conversation. Doesn't mean that the people on the receiving end are go, oh yeah, great, these are my pronouns, but it just shows that you're open and welcoming. And one of the other things, a tip that I've heard from people too, and this can be difficult, people who are transitioning, particularly if they're in that sort of middle zone with legal documents and things, if you see someone come up and they're checking in as, Ed, and their reservation name is under a very different name that may be much more female sounding, don't say there's been a mistake. Don't make an assumption. Just be very clear and just the reservation name I have under right now is such and such and such. Can I proceed with the check-in? Don't make an assumption. Ask the question, just confirm the details, because that can be very difficult sometimes too when a person wants to be called by their name, but because of legal issues, they still haven't been able to change the way they make reservations and things like that. So I would just be open to that. It's also good on intake forms for hotels at conferences. Just start including not just, a lot of form Mr., Mrs., just take away the honorifics, or if you need to include the honorifics, make the option for no honorific there so that people can at least do that in advance.
Fantastic. A couple more questions here. Carla Beckard asks, this is, I think, the question I think a lot of us have to have on our minds. Can you provide the best recommendation of what to use when talking about or to this community? Whether that's LGBT plus or the other acronyms that are out there.
So many acronyms, and it's funny. I'll tell you, there is no perfect answer. The reality is this: our organization is constantly changing. When you introduced us off the beginning, Mike, you said the Canadian Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, which is how we started out 20 years ago. We kept that logo and that name because it's our trademark and our legal name. But about 6 years ago, we changed to Canada's LGBT plus Chamber of Commerce. And literally a month ago, we changed to Canada's 2S LGBTQI plus Chamber of Commerce. There is no right answer. You're always going to have more. But what I will say, the reason that we changed the way we did is because it was significantly noticed that we weren't including the two-spirited. So our Indigenous folks were not included in that. Always put them at the front, by the way. If you are going to include the 2S, put it at the front because they were here first. So it's better to put them at the front. But the reason we chose that particular one was, again, we had so many people telling us which was what, and we literally maybe chose the easy way out, but we went with the federal government one. So the federal government just recently changed as well, and we decided that we would match with them being a Chamber of Commerce and having received a lot of funding from them and working so closely with them. So that's what we're going with. I think the more inclusive you can be, the better. But I understand that it's a hard one, and it becomes a mouthful. I don't know if I even managed to get it all out during the presentation. I probably garbled over it a couple of times myself. So.
And then one final question here from Ben Ligier. Do you see specific trends / targets in the hospitality industry to buy from diverse suppliers?
Great question. So as the Chamber of Commerce, that's our bread and butter as our supplier diversity program. So we do a lot with procurement with different corporate companies. I will say I don't see it yet. I'm seeing it a little bit. We do have some corporate members in the hospitality industry, Marriott, for example, Air Canada. I would like to see it more. And I've had conversations with some smaller hotel groups that I know are interested in doing it. I will say Accent Inns out in BC is doing a lot of progressive stuff in that area. So I do see it as a growing, but it's a slow start so far. But at the chamber we have almost 70 corporate members and a lot of the big heavy hitters. And so what we want to see is more of some of the smaller corporate heavy hitters start getting more involved. And I am talking to some hotels about that right now. So it's starting, but hopefully more.
Fantastic. Well, unfortunately, our time is up, Loren. Thank you so much for the great presentation. Also, thank you to Connor, who was helping out behind the scenes. Really appreciate your time, and we really appreciate the partnership. BCHA and CGLCC recently signed a MOU to continue this work. So I think it's really important to highlight that as well. And great to have you on, Loren. I'm sure we'll see you again at some of our other live events or in the online events that we do here.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Mike, and thank you everyone for listening. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you. A couple of final comments from me. Thank you to everyone who attended today. We have made a recording of this. It'll be made available a little bit later on. And just so watch your email for the recording link. We'd like to also add that coming up, we are continuing our fast track training series. The next track will be on leadership, and that's going to start on March the 7th. You can register via the BCHA website. just look for training sessions under events, and you can join that 6-week course, and lots of great insights and information on things that are changing in the world of leadership and new leaders and that sort of thing. We also have 2 great live events coming up. The BC Tourism and Hospitality Conference is in a couple of weeks in Prince George. You can go to bctourismandhospitalityconference.com to register. And also the BCHA Summit returns May 1st and 2nd in Kelowna. The website for that is bchasummit.com. Thanks again, everyone, for participating today, and we'll see you in March for our next virtual event. Thanks, and have a great day.